Hello students, today I'm going to go over another tutorial. I'm going to go over how to create a tape transfer. We'll end up painting a board with acrylic paint for the background and then using pen after we've done the tape transfer on top to decorate the background. And then optional, we'll create a border around with some masking tape. To create this project, you're going to need a reference image printed out. I'm using a 4" by 4" image. Clear tape, in this case I'm using book tape because it's a little bit thicker. A pen for marking up some of the designs after doing the tape transfer and painting. A board, in this case I'm just using the back of a sketchboard. Something to protect the area you're working on. A paint palette. For this one I'm just using clear plastic that I got from a garbage can liner, and then I'm just using a paper towel. I got the paper towel wet so that it keeps the acrylic paints moist as well. And then you'll need a paintbrush, palette knife. You don't have to have a palette knife, but I use one because it's a little bit more convenient. And then I've got some acrylic paints, water in a container, little bucket, and then also a little bit of masking tape. Now, you don't need this much masking tape, you just need a little bit. Alright, for most of this project I'm going to be speeding up the clips of video so that you can see what I'm doing in a quicker pace. So I used a little piece of plastic wrap or plastic paper to cover up my table so I don't get paint on it. Then I got the different types of acrylic paints. Now you can choose whatever colors you want, but make sure you have white. And then I would suggest using 2 primary colors. That way, as you're mixing, the colors mix well together without creating different types of browns. So here I put on the white coat first. Then after I had that white coat of paint on, that's going to keep the acrylic paints a little bit more moist. Then I added a little bit of blue, then a little bit of red, then a little bit of white again, and then I go back and forth until I just create a nice texture and color that I'm looking for. But be sure to do this lightly. You want to make colors that are light in general. That will make the tape transfer stand out a little bit more. Alright, next I tape down my image, whatever image that you got from me, or if you printed out your own, that's awesome. Give it a try. Let's see if it works. So I tape down my image. I burnish the back with the back of my scissors. That just makes it so that the taped image doesn't come off. Then I just cut a square image or a rectangle shaped image. I'll dip that in the water, and by dipping it in the water it's going to soften the background, the paper, and so then I'm going to peel off those little pieces of paper, and then I don't want to peel it off into the bucket. I want to peel it off onto my table because we don't want to dump this water down the sink if there's a bunch of little pieces of paper in it. If there's a little bit of paper in it, it's not a big deal, but if there's a lot, we don't want that. Alright, so I'll throw away those pieces of paper. If there's any leftover residue, I just dip my finger into the bucket to add some moisture to my finger and then finish peeling it off. So that's the next step, and then we have to let it dry. So what I'm going to do is just set down this tape on its side, and that way it can dry fully. Once I've got that done, I'm going to go back to my painted board. So I'll bring that over. If it starts bending, which it probably will because as one side gets wet, it ends up folding or pulling in the texture. But anyway, bring over my image, bring over my painted paper or block. Then I'll go ahead and cut out my image. Now you can choose to cut along the side of the object, whether it's a face or something else. Then you want to alter the image. So in this case I just did a zigzag pattern down the middle. Alright, and then I compared it. I was like, oh, maybe I'll use this gap a little bit. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'll make it look like a lightning bolt. I like that idea. And so then once I've got the design I want, I'm good, but I had some little pieces going off the edge, so I decided to just cut those.
Now you're not limited to just cutting with scissors. If you have, let's say, an X-Acto knife or something at home that you would rather use, where you can set down your image on a nice surface that you don't mind scratching up, so maybe a block of wood or something, you could do that and then cut out any particular design you want. We're not going to glue these down. We're just going to use the stickiness from the tape to have it stick to the board. All right, now that I've got my image down, I've got the design I want, I can go ahead and add more paint if I want to. In this case, I decided, you know what, I want some, there's so many cool colors in there, I want some warm colors. And you can get more paint out if you need to. One thing about this is you can do a wash, which is where you add a little bit of water to your paint, and then when you go over it, you can see through that color so that you can see the nice textures that you created with those other colors. So right here I'm going through with yellow and white combined, and I'm keeping it nice and light, and if it gets on the tape, it's not a big deal. You can always wipe that off with a paper towel. And you'll see me do that in a little bit. Now I decided I want it to be even lighter, so I added some white to that yellow paint. Now the light on the camera makes it so you can't quite see it very well, but you can still see through onto the other side of the paper. If you look to the beginning of the video, you'll see kind of what this looks like in the end. And then I ended up wiping it off a little bit with my paper towel, just so that some of the colors and stuff would show through. And then I decided, you know what, I want to add some texture, some cool looking colors to the center or to the right of that lightning bolt shape. And then if you're like, oh, you know what, that's too light. So I decided that was a little bit too light, so I wanted some stronger bluish white. So I went over that area again with a stronger paint. So if you want it to be more see-through, add just a little bit more water. If you want it to be more opaque, which is the opposite of see-through, then add a little bit more acrylic paint and less water. As you wipe off the paint, make sure you're doing that while the paint is still wet. You can wipe off acrylic paint off of the tape when it's dry, but it's a little bit more difficult. Next, you're going to tape down your board. You don't necessarily have to tape down your board. I chose to tape it down just because I wanted a nice border along the outer edge. And then using a ruler and a pen, go ahead and decide some sort of design that you want to create for this image. For yours it might be different. If you get a little bit of pen on the tape itself, you can always mark that off. So for me, I decided to divide up the space into triangles. I was like, I'm going to just add some lines so that these have some texture to it. Then as I did that, I was like, I want the white background to be separated a little bit more from the bluish red purple background. Drew some lines in different directions. You can shade in some areas. The key to whatever design you create is to have variety. Now in my case, I chose to add some curved lines because I noticed, wow, I've got so many geometric lines that it's going to get a little bit boring if I don't change things up a little bit. So I decided to add some curved lines so that there's more variety. I decided to add some thick lines, some thin lines, maybe do some outlines of different areas. This is up to you, but just make sure that you're adding variety And you don't have to stick to lines. In this, I noticed halfway through, I was like, man, I'm doing a lot of just straight lines. And so what I decided to do on the other half, on the left side, I decided to make some more just various patterns. You'll also notice on this right side, I decided to follow lines I already noticed in the image. So like the eye, the eyelid, I noticed there are some lines in there, so I followed that line of the eyelid. Here you see I'm doing just a different pattern. Also notice I used a piece of paper. The reason I have that piece of paper under my hand is because the ink will rub off when it's fresh like that. So I decided to put that piece of paper underneath my hand so that it didn't rub off. If you're trying to figure out some cool designs and you're just having a hard time thinking of them, one thing I would suggest doing is Googling Zentangle designs. You can get some pretty good quality, easy designs. And then you can see the finished product once I take off all the tape. Okay, good luck.